Hi, I'm Bob Willard, and this is a short briefing on the wonderful subject of sustainability terminology. We're going to snorkel in the terminology swamp for a little bit and give you a sense of some of the synonyms that are in play when people talk about this thing and how you should get comfortable with people using different language to describe the same thing that you are when you use the term sustainability. Let's start with definitions. The first one is the one that most people think of when they think of sustainability, and that's the famous Brundtland definition, named after the lady that wrote the report called Our Common Future. It was a while ago, 1987, but this is still the touchstone definition of sustainability used by many people. And you'll notice that the words at the top say that we're talking about meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So there's this intergenerational dimension that comes through very, very clearly from that definition. And actually what she was describing was sustainable development. So that's another synonym for the word sustainability, sustainable development. Here's another definition that some of you may have heard. This is by John Ehrenfeld, and he actually uses the word flourishing the way many of us use the term sustainability. And he's talking about the possibility that humans and other forms of life on Earth will flourish forever. The highlighted words possibility and flourish are what really kind of capture my imagination with this terminology. It's a little bit more uplifting than a lot of the definitions of sustainability, and is also helping us understand that this is not a laydown, that this is going to be possible. But we should try to take advantage of the fact that it could be and contribute to that possibility. Then there's the next definition, which is based on the fundamental concepts of sustainability. Let's just take a look at those. So there are three core concepts when we're talking about sustainability on this finite planet called Earth. The first one is that there is only so much carrying capacity. There are limits to the way in which we treat each other and treat the planet, that there is a socio-economic justice aspect to the way in which we especially treat each other, and there's that intergenerational responsibility that came through in the Brundtland Commission. So the third definition kind of builds on that, and what it says is we want to make sure that we have enough of everything for all, not only us as people, as humans, but for all species, forever, which is the intergenerational responsibility aspect. And I love this definition because it's only 4 words. You get a fighting chance of remembering that, and it kind of captures the essence of what sustainability is all about. When people talk about sustainability, they normally talk about 3 different dimensions: the environmental, the social, and the economic dimensions of sustainability. And I use a nested interdependencies model to try to show the interrelationships between those and the way in which the world actually works. The big nest is the environment. That's the air, land, and water that we have on the planet, and all of the living things in the water and the air and the land. And then within that, we have human society. Lots of other species as well, but human society. There are about 7.7 billion of us on the planet at this stage. Just to put that in perspective, when I was born, there were 2.4 billion people on the planet. So in one human lifetime, not that I'm responsible for this, of course, but in one human lifetime, the population of the planet has more than tripled. And then within society, we do things for each other. If it's friends and family, we do it for free. And if it's for other people, we do it for fee. And that's where a business comes in. So what we have here is businesses nested in society and nested in the environment. And the punchline for that relationship is that society and business are wholly owned subsidiaries of the environment. We've never had to really think about the possibility of the environment going out of business, but these days it's under a lot of stress, and we have to make sure that that possibility is never realized. So what we're talking about here is the environment is too big to fail. And that relationship between our dependence, both as businesses and society, on the environment is one that is probably timely for us to remind ourselves of. So let's build on this and take a look at other ways of representing these three circles. Very often when you see sustainability reports that are put out on an annual basis by many companies, they use this representation of those three circles, where you have the social circle, the economic circle, and the environmental circle intersecting. And where they all intersect is where sustainability lives. And then they label different other parts of it as well. But this is another way of representing the interconnections between the three circles. A third way is to use a metaphor of a three-legged stool. So let's take a look at that. The sustainability three-legged stool, the sustainability label applies to this stool, and the three legs are the environmental, social, and economic legs, all of which need to be robust or the entire stool collapses. So that's the nice thing about the three-legged stool representation. They're all dependent on the strength of each other. The difficulty with this metaphor is that it makes them look more separate than they actually are, and that's why I actually prefer the nested interdependencies representation that we looked at before. But let's go with this one for a bit and start to look at other labels that can be used for both the legs and the stool as a whole. So triple bottom line. Triple bottom line is a very common way of representing these three different dimensions of sustainability. And we also have the three P's and the three E's. And as you can see across the bottom, the three P's are people, planet, and profit, or actually it should be prosperity, but people very often think of profit as opposed to prosperity in the business community. And then we have the three E's, which are the environment, equity, which is an interesting representation of the social aspect of it, and economy. So three E's, three P's, triple bottom line. Again, they're all synonymous with the term sustainability. And then there are these. When we're talking about business sustainability, sometimes you talk about green businesses. Same thing. Sustainable development includes all of these things as well, and we talked about that before. Some people talk about CSR, corporate social responsibility, as the umbrella term for the entire stool, although as you might expect, its origins are strongly oriented to the social leg, but it's become an umbrella term for all three dimensions in some companies. Corporate responsibility, CR, is another label for the entire stool. The green label is obviously rooted primarily on the environmental side, but again, it's morphed into being an umbrella term for the entire stool. So again, some people use these terms in narrow ways and others use them in broader ways, and we need to get comfortable with all of those different depictions. Another version that's come into vogue recently, and you often see in especially business magazines like the Harvard Business Review or the Economist or MIT Sloan Review and so on, business-oriented magazines or journals, is this term ESG, relatively recent. And it's really the G that's the exciting part, because companies pride themselves on being well-governed businesses. And in fact, if they're well-governed, then they're more likely to attract investors, especially if they're publicly traded companies. So the governance is the thing that companies really want to be good at. And the E and the S just sort of go along for the ride. So when people say they care about ESG, that's fantastic. They're really talking mostly about the G, but the environment and society dimensions of that are wonderfully included in the trio. So again, it's the same three things. And what they've done is maybe relabeled the economic leg as governance. Some people say it's actually a fourth leg, and the economic one is assumed. So depending on who you're talking to, they may be using the term either at the exclusion of the economic leg or including the economic leg. So again, that's language. And that acronym ESG, most businesses are much more familiar with that than they are with the term sustainability, or many of them are. On the other hand, maybe what we could do is just drop all of the sustainability type language and just talk about managing company assets. So rather than calling it sustainability, we could just call it asset management. because what we're talking about is managing the assets that a company depends on. In terms of how we express those things, the word capital is kind of a convenient attention getter in the business community because it prides itself on managing capitals correctly, especially economic capitals that have to do with financial capital, manufactured capital, intellectual capital, the value of its patents and its licenses and its copyrights, etc. So that's a laydown, they understand that. But it also requires social capital and human capital to be able to realize that other economic trio of capitals. And as we talked about before, you need natural capital as well. So the environmental aspect is represented by natural capital. So really what this is suggesting is that you need to make sure that you are doing the right things on your natural capital, social capital, human capital in order to realize the economic assets, capitals, that you really are much more focused on usually in your business. So we start to get a bit of a interdependency here that shows the flow of the capitals and the contributions of the capitals to each other. We can also layer those capitals into the kind of nested interdependencies diagram that we had before and show that what we're talking about is the environmental part is the natural capital, and human and social capital are in society, and then the other capitals, we could put intellectual capital in there as well, are in the center. So different ways of representing these things, either as lists, as circles, as legs, whatever, but we're talking about the same kinds of things. There's another aspect of this, especially as we get into the people side, that might be a helpful framework as well. And this is from Alan Atkinson. And this guy is brilliant, and he's got really, really good stuff on this. And he talks about the sustainability compass. And the sustainability compass takes advantage of the north, south, east, west letters and uses those as an abbreviation for nature, economy, E, S, society, and well-being, which is sort of at the personal level, the human capital side. If people are working inside the company, but in society, it's at the citizen level. So we're talking about nature, economy, society, and well-being, which is a very clever way of using the north, east, south, west letters as a reminder or as a trigger for what these four dimensions are. If we take all of these ideas from the business community and we use this as a way to lead into what a sustainable community might look like, let's just round out this discussion with something that depicts what that might look like. So community sustainability, usually the term is not used that much at the community level. They might call them resilient communities, or they talk about quality of life, or genuine wealth. So that's not only financial wealth, but it's social wealth, which is relationships with your family and friends and other members of the community, as well as natural wealth, nature, the environment, that's in good shape as well. And we're talking about genuine progress, where we measure how we are doing, not only on the economic leg, which is the GDP approach, but we include metrics that associate with the health of the environment and of society as well. And as you can see beside each of these legs, these are some of the things that we focus on in communities to make sure that we have healthy, resilient communities. So good jobs and fair wages on the economic side, fair trade, secure supply chains, those kinds of things. And on the social side, a lot of the things that very often as citizens we take for granted as being provided or assisted by the government. So good working conditions where we do work, health and education especially, community relationships, etc. So what we have here is the same three things that apply at a community level that apply at a company level. So what we're talking about here is many concepts that are packaged differently depending on who is using the terms. It applies basically to all three of those economic, social, and environmental aspects of sustainability. You can use different metaphors to be able to portray them, but this is one way of making sure that you're not going to be snowed by people that are using slightly different language than you are if you're in a conversation and you're trying to engage them on a topic that perhaps they don't have quite the depth of knowledge in that you have.